Hi, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk about the spiritual awakening process. It is a very transformative journey that can happen when you are in like a life crisis of some sort, or you're going through a trauma, or you're just thinking that isn't life more than this. And then you start to wonder and stuff, and it triggers it. And the spiritual awakening process is very liberating because you are like forced to look inside of yourself and confront all those shadows and the darkness and uncomfortable little traits or whatever else patterns you have that are very uncomfortable. You don't want to see them. So we all humans do it. We hide away from what is uncomfortable for us. But when you enter the spiritual awakening, you can't avoid it. Because if you don't open up and start to release things, confront your shadows, to let go of them, they will make sure it's done. Your guides, your higher self, the big boss, is your intuition. So it is a way to raise to get a higher consciousness, to raise your frequency. And some people say that it is to go from the 3D mindset or consciousness up to 5D. And when you're in the 3D, where most of society is today, you are very limited in how you see things, and often you are very fear driven and ruled by your inner insecurities and expectations, and you trust too much in the system. And when you then enter the awakening process and going upwards toward 5D, you start to see a broader picture because you see the illusions, you see the truth. But best of all is that you actually find your own truth. Because that is also the point with most people today. We don't live from our authentic self. We are born in a society that is built on systems, that has created systems for us to fit into. And we are being raised by our parents, obviously, and then the school system come, then the job come, and then all other little systems there, and people around us, and we adjust and we adapt, and that is like the human way, in a way. But when you enter the spiritual awakening, then you start to question. You start to realize that this isn't real. We live in illusions that are built up for us to stay in the flock. And it's fine in a sense, but the tragic thing is that you lose yourself. Most of us never really get to know our authentic self. I remember I love those Shrek movies. They're ancient now, but I love them still. And Shrek told Donkey one day, ogres are like onions. They carry layers. Humans are like onions also. We also carry layers. And it is when you look inwards and confront what is uncomfortable for you that you start to peel off these layers, because you realize that maybe what you believe is not the truth, not your truth. And you start to see things as they actually are. You start to see through the system. And you have to make, I mean, when you enter the spiritual awakening, you can't really unenter it. That's quite impossible, to be honest. But you can choose how willingly you will go through with this transformation journey. It took me a while to realize that if because before I had my spiritual awakening, yeah, I believe in horoscopes and I believe in ghosts, but that was about that. I didn't believe in God or spirit guides or whatever else. And I most certainly didn't believe in myself, my intuition. But then something happened. It triggered something in me, and it took me like 6 months to realize that I actually was in a spiritual awakening process. A coworker told me, "You do know you have a spiritual awakening, huh? Your energies are all over the place." She told me, and I said, "What?" And she said, "Yes, that's why you're so emotional." And it is true. I was extremely emotional. I remember I could sit at work and cry, and I didn't even know why I was crying. Today I know, because I was being cleansed. Universe was lifting up things in my subconscious that I wasn't even aware of was there, uh, only with the purpose for me to look at it, confront it, release it. Because it is when you let go of what is buried inside you, it could be traumas, it could be negative patterns, how you look at yourself, criticism and stuff. And when you release that, that is when you make room for something else. That is true freedom. Trust me. I think that we don't like to confront our shadows. We don't like to see our flaws. We don't like to see our negative thought patterns as something negative because we are so used with having it in our mind. And when we do realize that there are other ways to think, to react, to respond, to choose, then we start to realize that we are actually the creators of our own reality. I lived my life in like a hamster wheel. I have an education as a linguist and publishing and everything for years. I studied university to work with books and text. And still I was so fear driven that I stayed in healthcare, uh, a field where I was like pushed into when I was 18 or something because I was unemployed. So the unemployment agency put me there. And then I realized, oh, it's obviously fun to work with people, but I didn't have to make any choices because how I worked was to adjust after others, to follow already set rules and systems and, like that. So it was easy for me to stay there. I got my paycheck because they needed people in healthcare. So I got a job. And then I didn't have to make any choices. I just went to work, did what I did, and then I went home. And it was comfortable for me. It was comfortable. And that is how I lived. 20 years of my life I spent in healthcare, even if I studied on university for working with books, for working with text, literature, everything. And now, then when I was like 38, I got a spiritual awakening and everything was turned upside down and it wasn't easy. As said, it took like 6 months before I realized what I had. And when you don't know what you are going through, it's even more difficult because you don't know how to deal with it. You just know that some crazy shit is happening with you. You're crying all the time and you're sensitive, and things that used to make sense doesn't make sense anymore. And then, since I didn't understand what was happening, I wasn't very cooperative. So I didn't understand that because there are triggers happening. Things will trigger for you to release. And if you don't do the changes, universe makes sure it's done. So it can be really ugly, actually. It can. Trust me on that. There has been chaos at jobs. I had to release my whole family because in a quite ugly way, because I didn't do it myself. So universe made sure it's done, and then drama comes. So it is easier when you realize what you are going through, and it is easier when you start to understand it in a sense and cooperate. That is the best advice I can have. Cooperate. You won't always like what your higher self choose for you. There can be manipulative things going on from up above to force you into a certain direction or to release certain people or thought patterns or habits that are not for you anymore. So it is all about changing into the right path for you, but also to let go of what is no longer for you. Because after every cleansing, I call it inner storms, because it feels like universe is vacuuming me when I go through my chaos, uh, releasings. Some people say dark night of the soul. It is very, very chaotic in a sense, emotionally. But after every storm, when I released what I needed to release, I get such a calm. It's like things are so much lighter. And it took a while, but afterwards I realized that for every storm, when I released something that was no longer for me, either internal stuff or external stuff, like people and stuff, I raised my frequency. So I got a little higher frequency each and every time. And best of all, I got more clarity, more insight, wisdom. I started to understand myself in another way. I started to like myself better. And one day I have always been very high sensitive, ADHD also on top of that, so impulsive and high sensitive. So I could really, overthink a lot. The nights could be horrible because some people could say something to me, they didn't mean it as anything harmful, but my mind created like, what was this to this? And it could take days, months, in some cases even years to forget. And then I built a bad self picture. So I never liked myself, really. But when you start to peel off everything that is not true, the illusions, then you start to see a whole other you. And you might actually like it, her, him a little bit better. And I do now. Today I do. I feel stronger, more authentic. I found my authentic self. And I am still struggling in a sense because life is uncertain for me. If you have seen other vlog posts of mine, I mean, I live with my friend. I have no income or anything. I released my whole family. So life is uncertain. But I also see how amazingly well I have done. I have made choices and decisions that I am not proud of or like, but they are done for my highest best because I'm listening to them now. And when you start to realize that an event that is happening, a trigger, it occurs because you are meant to release something, then it's much easier to go through in these storms or this chaos to actually do what they want, your higher self wants you to let go of. So after a while, when you have gone through the stormings and chaos, it gets easier to deal with. There are still days where I have lows where I think, what, won't anything change? Why doesn't everything, it's after all this work, it's time for it to go good and stuff. And I know it's going to come, but I also know that there are still some mindsets and stuff that needs to let go of. The spiritual awakening is a transformation process that is very difficult and challenging, but it is actually a gift. So if you have the spiritual awakening, hold on. It will be easier. It's not easy when the storming comes or when you start to cry and you don't know why you're crying or you need to release some people that you love. It's not easy, but it is always, always for the higher best. Know it. And enjoy the journey because it is an adventure that unfortunately not everyone have. The world is waking up though, so it will be more and more people entering spiritual awakenings because the world is chaos, and the world is chaos because humans are meant to wake up now. So it will be more common, but it's still not. Everyone should have it. We would have world peace if everyone saw themselves as their authentic selves, because we usually live in darkness. We create the darkness ourselves, but we can choose to live differently. It's just that circumstances makes us feel that we cannot. We need the money. We need the people in our lives. We need the job. Even if we don't like the job, we feel we need it. We are limited in our mindset and our way of living. And that is because we have a society that is built on making systems so we are staying in the flock. It is when you leave the flock that you realize that you have come very far on your path. And we all have a calling. We all have something we are here for, not only for our own growth, but there is another path also. And it doesn't have to be much or special in any sense of the way, but it will be very good for you and transformative. And so if you are in a spiritual awakening, please connect. It could be fun hearing your story. I will make this was a little longer video than I was thinking. I don't do any scripts or something, so I babble a lot. And the ADHD also makes me sometimes jump from one thing to another, and then 5 minutes later I go back to the first thing because I have forgotten the point. But it's me. No one is perfect. No one wants to be perfect, hopefully. Anyway, I will make a little shorter videos with like themes, like the dark night of the soul, how to do your shadow work, and the ego characteristics, and how to integrate your shadows and stuff. I will do it a little shorter. This was some more overall, and a little introduction to mine. Anyway, if you listen so far, thank you. If you want to follow me, thank you even more. I do like to see get more followers. And take good care of yourself, and please don't hesitate to connect. It would be lovely. Have a good day. Bye.